Today, our guest is Harbir Singh, who is an osteopathic doctor who specializes in sports medicine, and he is based in London in the UK. Thank you so much for joining us today on Dotiv, the podcast, Harbir. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you,
Welcome.
Guni. It's a huge honor for me to be on your show.
All right, so we're just gonna go straight into it because with you, we want to speak about sport medicine, which is your specialty.
Yeah.
So according to, I'm just gonna read up a quote that was given by the British Journal of Sport Medicine, where it says that pain is a common problem among elite athletes, and it's frequently associated with sport injury, where both pain and injury interferes with performance of athletes. So when they talk about pain management, or when they talk about pain, are they referring to exclusively physical pain, or is there other underlying type of pain we're talking about there?
I think that quote is referring to physical pain, and I think in practice, in clinics, the type of presentations you'll see will be of physical pain, but I think the cause isn't always physical, and that's an important thing to address, because you won't fix the person's problem if you're just focusing on the tissue that hurts. And there's often a process of being able to build that rapport with the athlete to get them to the place where you can have that conversation and look at, okay, what other aspects of your lifestyle could be impacting or making you more vulnerable, or have led to this injury.
Right.
That makes sense. So
Yeah.
there's an interesting book I was reading by Oprah, actually. She wrote a book recently with a neuroscientist, and it's called What Happened to You, as opposed to What's Wrong with You. What the emphasis of the book was that trauma, the body keeps score, and all of these things that we think may not be relevant have an impact on the body, and they have actual physical presentations of these traumas and of these scars that we hold on to. So if you have an athlete who presents with lower back pain, in acute pain, you have the whole kind of 2 to 4 week period where they stretch, they apply heat, they might have relative rest, and they feel a bit better. But usually if someone's coming to you, they're not the acute presentation, they are going on to the chronic presentation where it's limiting them, it's impacting them. So then you've got to look at other factors like the biopsychosocial model, which is to do with the biology, the tissue, the body, but then looking at what's happening in the person's mind, stress that they're going through, what impact that's having on their recovery. And there's lots of evidence behind how stress impacts recovery and immunity. And then the implications. So pain, by the definition of the International Association of the Study of Pain, is that it's subjective. It's whatever the person says it is. So if I cut my finger, and if Sasha, you cut your finger, our experience may be very different, because you may be a pianist, and so it's very important to you. There's a lot of, Oculus is a big area for your fingers because you use them very often. But for me, because I might be doing something which doesn't really require me to use my hands as much, it may not have as much significance. So the experience of pain will be very different. I will be in not much pain, whereas you may be in a lot of pain. And so other factors play a part. So my culture, my mom might say, man up and just get on with it, and that type of thing. So it may not be okay for me to express pain. Whereas for you and your family, it may be okay to show emotions. And so all of these things impact on someone's experience of pain, how long the pain lasts, whether it goes on to becoming chronic and limiting them, the whole psychology of performance, and whether that person will be able to go back to their sport and be able to compete at a high level. There's a lot of things around athletes, and a lot of rumination around, okay, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for my future? So it's quite an interesting area.
Right. And so it's very psychological, like a big chunk of it is actually very psychological. And I guess the physical ailments sounds like it comes after, like, this part is kind of dealt with or addressed, right?
Yeah. So in terms of Descartes, the theory was you step on a nail, the nail sends nerve impulse to the spinal cord, up to the spinal cord, to the brain, and then you experience pain. But we know it's not like that. We have athletes who will fracture a leg while they're running and will continue running on it. We have NFL players who will break bones and continue playing, and they swear that they didn't experience any pain. So there's a lot of things that happen in between the stimulus and the experience that the person has, and all of that stuff is very important. And that is there's a whole network that impacts on someone's experience. And so psychology is a huge aspect, and there's lots of lots more research and lots more literature and lots more videos coming out on mind over medicine, mind over matter, and the effects of mind medicine, and how spontaneous remissions, and there's nocebo effect, where somebody thinks something bad is going to happen, it may not happen, even though they're having a sugar pill, and it's an inert substance. So and placebo has a negative association, with the word, but actually it's the body responding, and if you can use that power, if you can use that energy in a positive way, and that's all through psychology. So it is mostly psychology, although when an athlete walks through the door, or a patient walks through the door, you don't want to give the implication that this is your fault or this is in your head.
So tricky.
That experience is very real for them.
So
you might like risk dismissing their experience, which would make it even more painful for them.
So if Tasha, if you had back pain and you came to my clinic and I said, oh, you need to do mindfulness, you might think I'm disregarding your experience and your pain. You might think, well, my back's hurting. What does that have to do with mindfulness? It's ridiculous. I'm going to go see somebody else. This doesn't make any sense. So there's a huge bridge to be built before anyone can get to that stage of addressing other factors apart from the tissue. So and my wife did a PhD on different types of psychological interventions, so CBT, psychotherapy, third wave therapies like mindfulness, that type of stuff. And she found that it wasn't the intervention that made a difference in terms of positive outcomes. It was the rapport between the therapist and the patient.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
I'm trying to, imagine your experience when you were at the Olympic Games, and how, when you were to deal with some athletes, like the amount of pressure you have, and having to recover an injury at that point must be quite tricky to deal with for an athlete.
Yes, I think for the athlete, it's life and death for them, really. If the Olympics is, the emotions are so high, the amount of people that I saw just lying on the floor crying. I met this Egyptian lady who had spent 8 years training for that one event, which lasted a minute or two, and that was her dream shattered. And so it's a very intense environment. It's a beautiful environment because you have so many nations coming together for this sport that they're playing, and it's very beautiful in that context. Everyone is very amicable, and there's this energy which is very uplifting in that kind of sport. But in terms of the athlete's experience, it's their whole life has come down to this 1 or 2 minutes.
Moment. But no wonder why people would even turn into to medication to kind of overcome that stress, or that the psychological stress or pain. What was your experience with more like doping, the doping side?
So emotional distress can cause physical pain just as much as a physical injury can, and in terms of analgesia, lots of athletes will self-medicate because it can become a negative spiral. So if you're taking something for the pain, it can become habitual, and you need it to recover, or you need it to continue to train, and it can become a crux. Doping is a very sensitive subject in terms of the Olympics, and in terms of international sport. There's a documentary on Netflix called Icarus, which looks at the Russian doping scandal, and what they found in the documentary was it came down. It was state sponsored, so it came down from Putin in terms of the whole doping system and how it was orchestrated. The most tested athlete in history was Lance Armstrong, and he never tested positive. He was on the court because his teammate told the International Doping Agency how he did it. So it is unfortunately something that is part of sport, and will always continue to be a part of sport. Unfortunately, it's not possible to have 100% clean sport. I think the agencies are doing everything they can within their power, but when you look at different nations like Jamaica, who may test once a year because they don't have the infrastructure to be able to randomly test athletes out of competition time, it leaves the opportunity for cheating to take place, because there is that expectation, not just on an athlete's level. They want to perform well. Their whole life is built up to this point, but also from a nation standpoint, there's a lot of national pride. So some of these things, unfortunately, are expected of athletes, and it's a really difficult area, to be honest. Also, there's Justin Gatlin. He beat Usain Bolt at the World Championships, and he had previously tested positive for a drug which is used in ADHD, and it's a neurostimulant, so it could impact performance. So it was on the banned substance list, but he was on a prescription to take it. So there's once you get that label of being a cheat as well, it can be the end of your career as well. So it must be a hugely stressful experience for an athlete if they're in a position where, even in the UK, we have a tier system for judo, for example. So depending on how well you perform, you will be paid a salary to train full time, depending on your performance. So there's a huge incentive to be able to perform well, and it's a huge burden, to be honest, for athletes. I've met lots of athletes who, when I ask them if they miss their sport, they say they hated it because they did it to the degree where, you know, swimmers, where they're adolescents and they're waking up 5 o'clock every morning to spend 2 hours in the swimming pool and then go back to swimming after school, and you know they hate the smell of chlorine, and they hate this, because they have such negative associations from it, from the rigors of training and the intensity, and so it's a huge subject in terms of spacing out training and gradually building somebody up, keeping the passion of the sport alive within them, not pushing them too much as parents as well, or coaches, keeping them injury free, which is near enough impossible as well. So all of that stuff plays a part. Unfortunately, I know some athletes who also have committed suicide because at the end of their careers, it was their whole identity was tied up in this sport. So if they're no longer this footballer, or if they're no longer this high jumper, then who are they? And so with the fame and the notoriety, when that goes, it can leave a big hole in that person's life.
Yeah. If you have an athlete or a client or patient that comes with this type of like complexity, be it psychological and physical, where do you even start? Because I think that, you know, unpacking this and what are some of the first things you do to create that rapport and understanding that those steps you need to take?
Yeah, so there's a really good book called Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini, and a lot of people in the financial market tend to use that book because you can impact a person, or you can change the way a person thinks by certain psychological tools. One of them is authority. There is a certain esteem that comes with authority. So when you work in a certain field, whether it's like judo, for example, if you're known as the best osteopath, the best therapist within that field, there's a certain amount of esteem that comes with it, and recommendation. So people come to you respecting your opinion, and that really helps you get off on the right foot. It's very difficult if you're trying to build a relationship from scratch, and an athlete is always like, well, does this person really know what they're talking about? How do I know this person is better than this other person? Or so you really need to build that authority beforehand. The other thing is that reciprocity is another principle talked about in that book. So there's lots of ways to build reciprocity, which is, you know, I do something for you, you want to return the favor and do that for me. So one of the easiest ways is just to listen to people, to really allow them to feel heard, because there's very few opportunities in life where people feel like they're truly heard. And so if someone feels like you really listen to them, then they are much more likely to listen to you and adhere to your advice. So the biggest thing in terms of starting off with anybody, whether it's an elite athlete or a high performance individual, whether they're a lawyer, a banker, anybody who's has an intense profession, is building rapport. So
I think that's like very relatable, right? If anyone who wants to get anything done with when they don't have all the resources, they know that, you know, building that rapport with someone or getting help from someone who they have rapport with is much easier to get the job done, right?
There's this really nice quote: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you have to show them you care about them before you can show them what you know. It doesn't really make a difference if you're smart. It's that bedside manner. It's that ability to make that person know, like, and trust you before you can really make a difference.
And so you were saying, like, with the medication is one way that, you know, athletes, I guess one of the tools that athletes use for pain management, right? Are there like other types of tools that athletes use to manage their pain, considering the amount of stress and like pressure that they're going through and what they need to perform, and this, the sponsorship deals, basically the weight that they're carrying with them, right?
Yes. So athletes in general, from my experience, they're quite naturopathic. They're quite averse to allopathic medicine unless they really need it. So they want to do all the natural things they can do to give them that slight edge. So that includes things like saunas, and if they have the money, they'll invest in buying one so they can do that on a daily basis, and that really helps manage injuries, help with recovery, lots of increases in human growth hormone, things like that naturally. Cold ice baths are now really popular. Wim Hof has popularized those. So people have ice baths, and personally I found they help with recovery as well, reduce inflammation in the body. And inflammation is a big obstacle because it's very difficult to train consistently if you're very sore. So that's a key tool as well. CBD oil has become very popular, and I've had mixed results. I've had athletes who have sworn by it in terms of reduction in anxiety and improvements in sleep, and I've had other people who it's had no impact on. So that's a thing that's in vogue at the moment. Massage has been probably used for over 1,000 years with athletes, particularly in freestyle wrestling in India. There's a big it's part, when I worked at the Olympics, not just the Indian athletes, but you had a huge amount of area. So you have every competing nation on the mats at the same time. And depending on which weight class is competing, that person would be warming up. So if you had 60 kg, the team would help the 60 kg guy warm up. He'd have his headphones on, he'd be trying to get himself in the right mental space. But in between warm-ups, they would either nap, or the other teammate would give them a massage, or a physio or a therapist would give them a massage. So massage is very much a part of sports, and rightly so in terms of the mind-body benefits. Exercises, it sounds counterintuitive, but exercise for a sport is very specific, and it can work certain muscle groups overly, and certain other muscle groups can get neglected. And for example, you could be a tennis player and have very strong shoulders and forearms, but you could have a rotator cuff problem which isn't being addressed because you're continuing to play tennis. So most athletes that I know of anyway will have physio on a regular basis to manage the injuries that accumulate. And I was speaking to an athlete the other day, and he said, if you wake up and you're not in pain, you're either not training hard enough or you're dead. So that's the kind of mindset that these people have. They expect to wake up in pain. It's just identifying what is a good type of pain, what is a bad type of pain, and what kind of pain can you work through, and what kind of pain do you need to get addressed.
I think you hit the nail on the head on that, because I think saying that and then not caveating with good pain, bad pain, and what you need to get help with, right? That would be sending the wrong message to people, because a lot of people train so hard and then injure themselves, and then they're completely out for the next couple of months. And these are like laymen, but not elite athletes. So I can only imagine the significance of like the rest element and the taking care of your mind and body, like being, I guess, very aware.
Because it must be tough to balance off rest time, training time, exercise or meditation and physical therapy, massage, etc., in such a short amount of time, because usually they just need to be able to perform very quickly. So how do you approach the concept of rest when you have an athlete come to you?
Yeah, so with any kind of high performer, whether they are an athlete or banker, they want better results. They want to be able to maintain the levels of productivity that they have been doing. So they're usually quite amenable to your advice, whether that be whatever you recommend. I had some examples here. So LeBron James sleeps 12 hours every day.
Really? I didn't know that.
Roger Federer says if he doesn't sleep 12 hours, he ends up getting hurt. Usain Bolt said he needs 10 to 11 hours of rest or recovery in order for the training to work, for the training to be absorbed. And Andy Murray sleeps, again, 12 hours a day. So
okay, so 12 is looks like a number.
Yeah, I mean, 12 is, these are just some extreme examples that I found of elite performers. But within my culture, so within the Sikh culture, it's very much like, you have to work hard, you have to wake up early, and laziness is kind of is not a admirable quality. And
Mhm.
I think we've gone a bit too far with that, and we've got to the point where actually we're getting more screen time than we are sleep. That's fact in terms of the
Right.
research. So our brains and bodies can't function. We're going to pick up psychological disorders and physical disorders as a result of not getting enough sleep. Now, if you have a banker, I have a private investor who comes to see me, so he's making massive deals every day, and so his performance is very important to him. So if I emphasize the fact that sleep will potentially give him another 5 years of earning life, or an
Right.
athlete like Roger Federer, if he accredits sleep to giving him that extra longevity and high performance in his career, then people are usually a bit more serious about fitting it in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, I myself struggle with sleep, but I think that this is actually a pandemic. I think insomnia, sleep issues, screen time, all of these
Right.
things are a pandemic, and they're affecting the world in a negative way in terms of from a psychological, emotional, spiritual, and also a physical perspective as well. So I think we need to go back to more balance really in order to prevent injuries, regardless of whether it's an athlete or just the everyday person.
How do you include meditation in, or like introduce the topic of meditation to an athlete who potentially, because of his background, would not necessarily be very prone to it, or like not even know what it is or how to start?
Yeah, so thankfully there's people like LeBron James who meditate
Yeah.
while they're actually waiting on the sidelines to go and play.
Right.
There's another great book called The Mindful Athlete by George Mumford, and he talks about how people that he worked with, like Michael Jordan, felt like the game slowed down, and in the last 2 seconds they were able to make the game-winning shot because they were able to relax their body. And when your body and mind is relaxed, you're able to perform better, you're able to see
Mhm.
more. Even from a cognitive perspective, when you're stressed, you have cognitive tunneling, so you don't see actually what's happening around you.
Mhm.
So so stress management is very important. It used to be sold as stress management. So when you work with athletes, you would say, oh, I think this stress management technique would really help. Now,
Right.
because it's become popularized with people like LeBron James,
Yeah.
people want to think, well, if it's working for him and he's a legend, the best ever, then maybe it will help me. So that helps. And I think with any kind of habit, any kind of positive behavioral change, the key is to start small. So start with 30 seconds.
Mm.
There's another great book called Tiny Habits, written by a behavioral scientist called BJ. I can't remember the surname, but he talks about how one of the problems with behavior change is that our expectation is too great. We set our goals so high and we fail, or we do it for a few days and then we fail, and then we give up on that behavior.
Yeah.
So if you start at 30 seconds of meditation and do that for a year, you're still better off than doing nothing, or doing it for a few days and stopping. So
Yeah.
starting small is often key. With my regular patients, I say to them, there's some breathing exercises that will really help. There's lots of evidence to show that they will help to modulate pain, and it will help you get better. It will help your immunity, your recovery will be faster, and that usually makes them more amenable to trying out meditation.
Mm.
I I like talking to Harbir because so far we are already at 4 book quotes.
Yeah.
And
We have got loads of
I
quotes.
saw I saw his lately. I think his wife was like, I need to get rid of some of those books. And
Yeah, I
so
saw the
now I
post about that.
understand like how many books he's referring in just one conversation. So we can see that this is the real deal.
Yeah.
Well, if you speak to her, please put in a good word for me in my book collection. But I think
We'll do, we'll
has,
do.
yeah, everyone has a hobby, and I think for me reading, I think there's people who spent their entire lives studying a topic, and
Right.
if someone's put 30 years of work studying, like George Mumford has spent 30 years of work studying mindfulness in sports, why not pick their brains and learn from these people? I think it'd
Right.
be a travesty not to.
Yeah, you're right.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess moving on from what you were saying, like, so mindfulness and rest is a critical element, I guess, for elite athletes. And I guess, I mean, also for the layman, right? Or everyday people. So in terms of like managing the pain on top of like rest, meditation, physical therapy, what type of like holistic practices do elite athletes kind of practice and incorporate in their pain management, or do they even like look at alternative methods of managing the pain?
Yes, that's a good question. And just to go back to the importance of sleep, because I really want to underline this. I say to the people that I work with, you're better off sleeping than you are taking steroids. So with steroids, we know that there's a 20% increase in strength. And I believe, and from my studies, that you will get greater than that benefit from, in terms of neuromuscular firing, in terms of learning movement patterns and reflexes, from actually getting adequate sleep. So unfortunately, you know, it's a social media age. A lot of us are spending a lot of time at night scrolling, looking at screens. And I feel like if we can just start to have some boundaries around that type of stuff, and we can get better sleep, then I feel like human performance is going to go, you know, is going to skyrocket in terms of productivity and performance. And so rather than if someone's taking, you know, human growth hormone is probably in the UK £400 a month, right, which is a significant amount of money. I feel like you would get better results from just sorting out your sleep. And if you don't sort out your sleep, then all of these things are not going to be beneficial for you in the long term anyway. It's going to be a very temporary boost in
But
performance.
I think that managing your sleep or getting your sleep right is much more difficult in terms of discipline.
That's why I was snickering this now, because when you were saying like, you know, you're spending time scrolling at night, and now that like Guni and I are both like, you know, in this entrepreneurial journey, it's really challenging to like find that cutoff. And so I like, she always tells me, because I'm in Malaysia, so then the time difference, I'm ahead of her, and she's like, I think it's bedtime for you. But like, it's so hard to like switch up. And I finish speaking to her, it takes like an hour to 2 hours to wind down on top of that. So if I finish later, then it's like 12 a.m., 2 a.m, I'm going to bed, but then I have to wake up again at like 6 or 7 to like start. It's a bit much, right? I like it accumulates over time. When you start accumulating, you get into this rhythm of not knowing how to like restart and get into the better habits, right? But I think what you said earlier about starting small and just kind of slow increments might be the right way.
So the highest rate of heart attacks on any day in the year is daylight saving times, when the clock goes back 1 hour. So 1 hour's less sleep causes, there's a causation relationship between that and heart attacks. So sleep has a massive impact. And I have a family history of heart attacks and heart disease, and I struggle with sleep. But one of the and more important than hours is consistency of timing, in terms of my studies of the research that I've looked at. So you want to be going to sleep at relatively the same time and waking up at relatively the same time. It's very difficult for people like shift workers, like firemen and women, and airport staff, when they're working earlys and then late, and the biological clock is all over the place. It's very detrimental to health, actually, and it's a greater risk of heart disease and cancer than smoking is, in terms of the World Organization lists shift workers as a greater risk. So yeah, sleep is really important. One of the things that I found works for me recently is I will actually physically, in terms of behavioral change, again, there's ways that you can make behavior change possible. One is to make the habit so small that it becomes there's very little mental friction to getting it done. The second is to change your environment. So I'm working on actually physically changing my environment. I will take my phone, my laptops, all my devices, and I will lock them in the car, which is a distance away from my house.
Right.
And so if I decide, oh well, I'll do some work.
Excuse me, this is please don't say this on air, because this is the moment where somebody's gonna like, you know,
I'm gonna find Harbir's car. Okay, we don't know where you live. Okay,
where does he live?
He lives in New Zealand, guys. We made a mistake earlier. It doesn't live in London. It's New Zealand.
Yeah, we have pretty good security. It's okay.
All right.
It's not always in the car. It's at different locations on the day.
I like that.
But that physical barrier of thinking, okay, I need to go all the way there to then access my phone to check my messages or check my emails, it actually forces me to go through that discomfort of lying in bed and not necessarily being able to sleep straight away. And it helps me, it's helping me reset my sleep routine. So that's one tip that I have. You can either change your environment or make your habit so small that it becomes very easy to do. And that over a consistent basis you can build on. But back to your original question in terms of other interventions, so most athletes will try anything that has other people have said has benefited them, or somebody they trust has said will benefit them. So if a coach recommends reflexology, cupping, there's Michael Phelps made cupping famous at the Rio Olympics because all of the swimmers had the cupping mark. So you know that he swears by it. acupuncture. There's lots of NFL players. Anthony Joshua, the professional
Boxer, right?
boxer, he uses electroacupuncture. So all of these treatment modalities have benefits and are worthwhile and are worth pursuing. Chinese medicine, whatever you can do that works for you,
Right.
you should definitely go through a process of exploring and making your own judgments. I sometimes have people come to see me. I used to work at Great Ormond Street, and next door to Great Ormond Street, we have the Royal Hospital of Homeopathic Medicine, which is, I think it was set up by the royal family, and they have 1 or 2 acupuncture clinics in there, but mostly it's GPs who now practice homeopathy. And I was shadowing one of the consultant acupuncturists he's a GP in the army, and he was talking about homeopathy, and he said he's seen people who have got better from homeopathy, who had been through the whole medical gambit. They had MRI scans, neurologists, they had seen everybody, and nothing worked for them. And he said, you know, we are reluctant to try complementary therapies in the Western allopathic medical model when these expensive, invasive procedures haven't worked for somebody, and we still won't try homeopathy. He said it doesn't make any sense when something that costs a minuscule amount compared to these other interventions that people have tried and failed. So I really feel it's important to explore different treatment options. And when you find something that works for you, just to don't worry about what other people say, to make that part of your lifestyle.
I think that ties back into kind of why even as Dotiv we want to provide different types of practitioners, because sometimes one modality will speak more to you than the other, and that could be just linked by, you know, maybe it's heritage. Maybe one would like, you know, connect better with Ayurveda because it's part of their, you know, their cultural heritage, or sometimes completely the opposite is just that it speaks to them. So I really like the message of just explore and see what works for you.
And sometimes it's like I do acupuncture, and I use an approach called Western acupuncture, which is what the kind of medical doctors in the UK have deemed acceptable. So they don't use the same systems of meridians. They use trigger points and other established research-based points from Chinese medicine. But there's some people that it won't work on. There's some people where you can put a needle in them and they will have a miraculous recovery of a problem that they've had. I had a Thai boxer who had kicked somebody's shin, and their toe was in pain for 6 months. So they may potentially have had a hairline fracture. But 6 months later, the bone has healed. They still haven't made any progress. I put 1 needle in him and his pain was gone, and he didn't have a reoccurrence. So you have some people's nervous systems who are very receptive to certain types of treatments. But the only way you'll know that is by exploring. And you might have some people who have chiropractic treatment, for example, and it feel like it does nothing for them, but another person, it may have a massive benefit. So it's incredible how different people's their aura, their nervous system, their biology, how it responds differently to different types of treatments. And also, if complementary therapies didn't work or they didn't have value, they wouldn't have withstood the test of time. Anyone who's you know has experience of the industries will know the potency that these therapies have.
100%. And I guess like in this sense, right? So I guess we've been talking about you know, the different ways we use athletes use medication, physical therapy, rest to kind of heal themselves and navigate their pain and aches, right? And for the day-to-day person like me and Guni, I'm not sure if you're the day-to-day person, because I know you're like pretty athletic based on like what we've seen on your Instagram page. But you know, how can we apply these sort of practices in our day-to-day, or in, you know, to improve our quality of life when we experience these pains and aches?
Yeah, so I think with the first thing when you work with anyone is that you don't want to dictate what the person should be doing. You know, I wouldn't want the whole old system of when you go to see a doctor would say, oh, you smoke, you need to stop smoking, it's killing you, right? And they realize that doesn't work, because people don't stop smoking because you tell them it's going to kill them. You have to use another system. So first thing would be finding out what that person wants. So Sasha, if I say to you, you know, sleep would really help you, sorting out your sleep routine, and actually you get a lot of joy and fulfillment out of your work and actually working late into the night, and you wake up feeling refreshed, and it's actually maybe it's counter all of that positivity and fulfillment you're getting from it is counteracting the negative aspects of not having that extra hour or two of sleep. So it's just meeting the person at where they're at. So
Yeah.
you have to go back to building that relationship first, and then you can have that conversation of, okay, somebody may disclose that, you know what, the biggest issue I have right now is that I'm having trouble with my spouse, and because I'm having trouble with my spouse, I'm not sleeping at night, and I'm drinking too much, and I don't want to compete anymore, or I don't want to go to work anymore, or I can't focus at work. So then there's no point you telling them you should go sleep at this time.
Yeah.
You should
Yeah.
download this app, because their marriage is probably the thing that needs to be addressed, and then you can look at ways to try and help with that, or help support the person through it, or be just a listening ear. Or there's obviously couples counseling or individual counseling, lots of different types of, even acupuncture, lots of different types of complementary therapies that can help with that. But it's really trying to be open enough to allow that person to have that space to tell you what they need help with, and then you can help them. So yeah, I mean, yeah, relationships are a big thing. So it may be that if we have some relationships in our lives that are potentially like the biggest cause of stress, then that's the thing that we need to address then. For some people, it's addictions is a big thing right now. So whether it's alcoholism, in the UK at least, I know there's a big problem with like cocaine, marijuana, those types of addictions. So again, it's looking at, well, the addiction is probably trying to anesthetize some type of trauma or some type of pain or some type of emptiness that person is feeling. So it's trying to kind of figure out what the underlying problem is, and then just support the person, hold their hand through that journey, as opposed to telling them you need to download the Headspace app.
The worst advice.
No, I don't think it's the worst, but it's just that it could be, it all depends on if you're in the right space to respond to that advice, right? And I guess it goes back to, if I were to kind of tie your question and Harbir's answer, is more like, be it an athlete or be it layman or the common, we're all unique. We all have different circumstances, different environments, different triggers, different relationships, situations, etc., that will impact the way you perform. And I guess that performance and what performance means to you is very specific. And this is where, I feel that complementary and alternative therapists or practitioners are actually there to hear. And I think that's why we're advocating for this as well, is because they are trained to hear this. They are trained to be able to guide you to unfold this. And actually all the answers are within you. Usually that this is all what practitioners are telling me, is like, well, they actually know it, but it's just by poking with
asking the right questions, right? Yeah.
I think complementary therapists have a great opportunity for that, because they are with the person for probably far longer than the general practitioner is going to be with them.
Yeah.
So they can have that conversation, and that person can
right.
Yeah,
because like a GP is what, 10 minutes on the phone, or 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you're lucky, and it's 5 minutes on the phone, and they can't see your face, they can't see your kind of your body language, and it could be even video, and that's enough to tell sometimes. But I think that with the GP there's a lot of rapport that is missing currently. So cool.
There are some anchors that it can be beneficial in having, and those are probably beneficial for everyone. So like sleep is going to be one of them. So just trying to have some kind of system or protocol around sleep.
Right.
Meditation is going to be another one. Some people don't benefit. Some people can't get into meditation. So maybe journaling might help them, or maybe just going for a walk without technology. Some kind of thing to help them connect with what's going on the inside. Or yoga, something mind body based. I think is really another really important anchor. I think diet is really important. So hydration levels, like making sure you're having some kind of protocols around water intake, and also fruit and veg intake, I think are important as well, because I think part of managing life is managing your energy. So if you
that's a great quote.
That's
I have
a
to say
quote.
that. That's a quote. I love that. We're always looking up a quote, because but yeah, we love it. The bites of wisdom. That's how people can take, start the thinking process of things, right? Sorry, not to cut you off.
And then I think another anchor is probably a really important anchor in terms of the literature as well as relationships. So there's another book called The Village Effect, and they looked at people with cancer and heart disease. There's actually a village in near New York called Rosetta, I think it was called Rosetta Stone. And it was all Italian immigrants. And what they found was they weren't getting any heart disease, they weren't getting any cancer. And the book talks about it and explains it in detail. But when they tracked the families, over time they started having an infiltration of Western diseases. And when they looked at what was different, they found that the cultural practices of this town in Italy were starting to fragment. So people weren't living in big households with grandparents and grandchildren, everyone together. They weren't getting together on Sunday for church as a whole community. There wasn't that, go and check on your neighbors, see how they're doing and that type of thing. So there's a lot of research in that book, but they look at breast cancer survival rates, and they're massively increased by just having a meaningful connection with somebody. Yeah. So me personally, I try and have some kind of I try and work on this. I'm not great at it, but some kind of contact with the kids where I can smile at them and they can smile at me every day, because I feel like nurturing those relationships in your life is going to be really important to your outcomes in terms of how fulfilled, how happy, how healthy you feel. And and there's numerous studies on longevity and the impact of relationships and it's on this. So I think that's another anchor.
It really ties back to like our pillars, because we follow the pillars of like WHO, where health is really like physical, social, mental, and spiritual health. And so this element that you're talking about is social, right? And also the fact that I think my understanding from my own readings and experience in life, I feel like human connection is probably like the most fundamental human need above everything else. And then everything else you do kind of ties back into having to need that connection, right? So it says a lot about having a community to back you and to support you, right?
And I think if we have those anchors, those 4 or 5 anchors, then if we're having problems with a work in our workspace or with a colleague or those types of things, we're going to have these anchors to weather us in the storm. And these things can be consistent in our life, where lots of things will be transitory, relationships, people will come and go. But if we can just have these 4 or 5 things, it can really help kind of keep us grounded in life and not get washed away in chronic pain or psychological disorders, that type of stuff. But yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Harbir. Yeah. So I think, like, Guni, what was your like biggest takeaway?
Well, I think it's this whole pillars, right? So from sleep, meditation, diet, and the sense of community or relationships, definitely is something that, again, it's a very holistic process, isn't it? So yeah, thank you so much for this wisdom for today.
Yeah, and all the quotes and books for our listeners. And
Influence, I guess what happened to you? Mindful athlete. And the last one was
Village
Tiny
Effect.
Habits.
No, the Village Effect.
There you go.
But you know what? We can table that for later. But I guess to close off, we want to do like a quick rapid fire round of questions with you, Harbir. So I'll take the first one. So do you want to tell us, what is the worst health advice you've ever received in your life?
The worst health advice that I've ever received is that I should eat meat. So when I became vegetarian about 16 years ago, and someone told me I need to eat meat for my health, and I think there's nothing against, I don't have any problem with any kind of dietary preference that anybody has. I just don't think the same advice fits everybody. So some people may do very well off a particular type of diet, which may not suit another person. Without knowing that individual, it's very difficult or having a conversation with them, knowing anything about them, it's very difficult to say everybody should do this. So I think that was the worst piece of advice that I can remember.
Yeah.
Okay. I would have comments on this, but we will not go into that.
It's rapid fire.
Today. And the second one is, if there was one habit we should all adapt, what would it be?
I think the one habit is cutting down our use of technology. I think it's become so ubiquitous that we now can't even go to the toilet without having a phone. And I'm talking about myself as well.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. But I think it's having a negative impact, and I think if we can just reduce our consumption of technology and have some boundaries and protocols around it, I think it would impact the quality of our lives.
Yeah, agreed. And for the final one, which is a very light one, if you were to put a song or a soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
I like the Rocky soundtrack. I think it's because I heard that growing up as a child. I used to love that movie, but also because my family came from Punjab, they were immigrants, and I was talking to my son about how people from India before independence didn't necessarily have the same opportunities as the British did in India. And I said, now in the UK, if you work hard, you can become anything, you can do anything, and I feel like that soundtrack resonates with me because I've had an opportunity to get a good education. I have a beautiful family. I have a great job. I have everything that I could possibly want. So, you know, I feel like that soundtrack really motivates me to think of the underdog and how anything is possible.
Yeah.
And how reflective of our episode today as well. So
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Harbir, for making the time. And yeah, we're so glad to have you on our show.
No, I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I follow your content, also just the quality of the content you put out, the production value, just the aesthetics and the optics of everything you do is brilliant. So, you know, I know it's just going to grow from success to success. So well done to you guys.
Thank you.
Oh, thank
so
you.
sweet.
It means a lot.
Yeah, it means a lot. It really does.